Good evening, and welcome to the September 18th, 2017 meeting of the Merrimack School Board. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 2 on tonight's agenda is public participation. If you'd like to come to the mic, state your name and address for the record. And if you're a student, you just need to state your first name and grade. Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Go on to item number 3, which is the presentation of New Hampshire Interscholastic Association, that's the NHIAA that we all know, Division I Sportsmanship Award. So I invite to the table NHIAA Executive Director Jeff Collins, Principal of Merrimack High School, Ken Johnson, Assistant Principal of Merrimack High School, Peter Bergeron, and our Athletic Director-elect, I'm not even sure, there's like some gray area there, but you're getting there, and that is Mike Susi. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much. I am especially honored tonight to introduce to you the Executive Director of the NHIAA, Mr. Jeff Collins, former principal at Portsmouth High School, with a very special presentation tonight. So, Jeff, I turn it over to you.
Absolutely, Ken. Thank you very much for inviting me here. Board members, I really appreciate being invited here tonight to talk to you a little bit about this very prestigious award in the state of New Hampshire. As Ken mentioned, that I was a principal for many, many years, and there were a number of things I was very proud of. The gym is constantly filled with banners that signify great achievement by individuals and also teams, and that's what they signify. These green banners that was hard won by Merrimack High School for Division I this past year is really a community celebration. It really should be. The significance of this banner, sportsmanship, overall sportsmanship in Division I, shows the sportsmanship for the coaches, players, cheerleaders and pep band, spectators, game and school administration. It is truly a community win, if you will. And this green banner that Ken will hold up in here in a minute, it certainly signifies a great deal of work on behalf of the entire community towards sportsmanship and leaders in the state regarding with regards to sportsmanship. So it is certainly our pleasure, my pleasure as the Executive Director of the NHIAA to be here and officially award Merrimack High School the Division I Sportsmanship Banner for last year. So congratulations everyone here, and certainly congratulations to the high school. It is certainly an honor, and well done. Very well done.
I can say that for 4 years I represented Merrimack High School at the NHIAA events as the assistant principal, and ever since, for more than a decade and a half now, as principal. And Jeff will tell you, Pete will tell you, Mike, who has a lot of experience in coaching, will tell you, it is, without a doubt, the single most coveted award by any principal in the state when it comes to athletics. As Jeff said, it is a community award, and we have put great emphasis, especially these past couple of years, in developing a culture that feeds into sportsmanship. I want to credit certain people, obviously. For example, Eric Sabian, outgoing Director of Athletics, Peter Bergeron, who would constantly get on the intercom and encourage sportsmanship. But it just said, all of our 40 teams, players, coaches, and the parents and spectators at the games. Sometimes we can be a bit edgy, but I think the fact of the matter is coaches love to play in our gym. Mm-hmm. They love to come to our fields. And I will tell you, after a long time, I cannot express enough the sense of pride that I have in being the recipient of this award on behalf of our school. It is truly, truly a genuine community experience and truly a genuine community award. So Thanks, Jeff. And
Absolutely.
I'll also say, on a personal note, Jeff took some time out. He's a very busy man, lives all the way over in Exeter, and he took time out today to come here. And I don't know that too many people would be willing to do so. Jeff's that kind of guy.
Absolutely. I'd like to say one additional thing. I would like to thank Merrimack High School for also hosting our Division I state track meet last spring. Wonderful facility that you have provided to your student athletes here in the state. Just a beautiful, beautiful facility. The staff and of Merrimack High School made all the Division I schools feel absolutely welcome at their at the event, and also for taking the lead in doing hosting the Meet of Champions for track. It was a wonderful way to showcase what you guys have worked very, very hard to provide for your student athletes here in the state and in the city of Merrimack. So I would like to thank you on behalf of the NHIAA for hosting those two large events here in your community. I think it's a testament certainly to you folks and to the people at Merrimack High School to provide not only for their student athletes but for the student athletes across the state. So I would like to thank you as well for that.
Be more than happy to host it again, Jeff.
Great look.
Pete, you want to join us here? This is really cool. It is. It's wonderful. You all set, guys? Thank you very, very much.
Congratulations. Nice job. Congratulations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jeff. I think there might be a couple questions for the board before you head out, and I think Michael was first. Sorry, guys.
Actually, I don't have so much a question, but I just wanted to comment and thank the coaches, the teachers, and the students of Merrimack High School. I'd also like to thank the previous coaches of all these kids for middle school. I think the MYA is also a big piece of that. As a coach of MYA, I know that we instill sportsmanship at the lower levels, and I think it's a great thing for the community. So, thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, here. And honestly, I just want to let you know, Jeff, we're off to a good start already in this school year as well. We've had 2 home football games in the last 2 weeks, and we lost a tough one to Nashua South on Friday night. But what was happening at these events was, of course, we responded as many have tried to support the hurricane relief. Yeah. So our cheerleading squad does a 50-50 at every game to raise money. They gave their half to hurricane relief, and so did the winner of the 50-50. So that raised $500 for hurricane relief. And this past week, we had one of our youth in town, Mighty Max Mendez, just had a bit of a relapse with his cancer. And they did a 50-50 raffle, supporting him, and also the Booster Club also did a Mighty Max fundraiser at the event. So we're always looking at the opportunity at sporting events to really reach out to our community and support them. So just know we have not rested on our laurels, and we're going forward.
Absolutely not. The kids are amazing. And the fact that they just surprise you all the time to give back. Oops,
Your light's got to be.
Sorry. The kids are just absolutely amazing. They rally around causes, and this is what really athletics is all about. It's an extension of that classroom, and how do we give back and help others through sport. So there's no doubt the culture that has been created and built here in Merrimack to go after these banners through sportsmanship is there, and it takes a long time to do that. So again, congratulations to the culture that has been built here.
Thank you very much. And thank you all.
Thank you. Oh, here we go, John.
And we're on to item number 4, which is the outcome from use of K-9 unit at Merrimack High School in June. So I'll invite to the table Police Chief Denise Roy, and we will keep Principal Ken Johnson. And we also have Captain
Mike Dudash.
Mike Dudash. So I want to get the titles correct, so thank you. The ranks, they're not titles, they're ranks. So welcome, and look forward to your update.
You want to go, Ken? Sure.
Well, I would just like to take a moment to thank the board for recognizing that we are an educational institution and for taking the tact that we did. In fact, Jeff and I shared common practice. He said when he was principal at Portsmouth, he asked the same of his board, that we educate the kids first before we go forward. And that's what we did, because we are indeed an educational institution. So I thank you, because I think that is fair practice. I think it's good practice. And I know Denise, or I should say Chief,
Still captain.
still captain, would be willing to talk more about the details about what exactly happens during such a sweep and maybe what the timeline was like.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having both the captain and I here tonight. We really appreciate it. Just to give you kind of a snapshot of kind of where we have come so far, back in May of 2016, we started to introduce the dog. At that time, it was Canine Gunny, who was handled by Greg Walters, Sergeant Greg Walters. We started at the middle school in June of 2016, and it was not to scare the children. We went in an attempt to kind of like a meet and greet almost, so the children could become accustomed to having the dog around and what the dog looked like, and the dog was actually very friendly. So they kind of got a sense of what that was like. The very next day, we went to the high school and did the same thing, and that obviously was the purpose of that was to get the kids who were still going to be there, if the dog was going to come around again the following school year. Again, they would get a sense that the dog is not a scary tool. He is a tool to help us. So it actually went really well, and all the kids were very receptive. They kind of did a little a demo, to show how the dogs can find the drugs and what they do and what's entailed in that entire process. So after that reception, we had talked with Ken at length in regards to having a set of dogs, because it takes more than one dog to go through the school, obviously, for the size, just the size of the school. So at that point, we had decided 6 dogs would be appropriate. We consulted with the handlers and what would make it easier for them and what is not too taxing on the dogs. So we had discussed, we actually met on several occasions on how would we approach this. It's a new phenomenon. It's, we don't want to, we do not want to appear as though we're pushing the dogs in the schools. That is not it whatsoever. If you would like the dogs in the schools, well, that's what we will provide for you. So we wanted to make sure that the students and the staff and the parents were educated on what having dog searches in this high school would be. And actually Ken crafted an excellent letter along with Mark to make sure that everyone kind of understood. It would be towards the end of the 2016-17 school year at some point, and the dogs would enter the school. So we did in May have the dogs, 6 dogs from various agencies, thankfully. Our dog, since Gunny retired, our dog was in training and has since graduated from canine drug school. So he was there to watch, but there was 6 dogs from other agencies. I don't know if you want to go into how you process through the school, but once that the school was in official lockdown, and not until that point did we bring the dogs in. The dogs never encountered any students. It was just Ken's staff and the police department that were there that they encountered.
And the kids were especially cooperative, as was the entire staff. We also made sure that the community received the instant results of the search via school messenger.
We tried to do everything possible to make sure that the message was sent out that the dogs were going to be in the school at some point. And again, that first time, it's imperative to make sure that people kind of understand that, we're not trying to scare anybody. We're not trying to send the dogs in for that purpose. The dogs are there for a tool for not only for us, but for the school system as well. And it worked out very well. Mm-hmm. The results were we actually found the dogs did not find any contraband, any drugs. On that day, and it was very quick. We were in and out in less than 30 minutes, and it went well, and that's where we are.
Right, and often I say, when other schools have done this, they don't release information after the fact, and to grant you, our time after the fact was really short term. But in the short term, after the search, there were no drug, alcohol, or paraphernalia incidents found in the building through the commencement and through the final exam period. I don't know if Captain Dudash, if you wanted to add anything at all?
No, everything I've heard from the community and everybody else in the student body was received very well. I think it sets the tone of that no drugs are going to be allowed in the school system.
Right.
At the same time, I think we did it the proper way.
Right. I really, the coordination with the police was really outstanding.
You know, as far as the police department goes, well, I think Chief Doyle had the same kind of pattern that we plan on having. If you want us, we'll be there, and that's your call. But it's certainly something that we're more than willing to help out with.
And I always say the same, I respect the will of the board, and I'll do as you ask, so.
Okay. Are there questions or comments from the board? Cinda?
I mean, I would like to echo some of the comments. I think we had great communication all the way around. There were quite a few meetings. I know Safeguard had given their blessing, and we really tried to think through all of the details together, you know, as a team, collaboratively. I think it went really well. I think I would like to see this type of a program continue at the high school. I'd also be really interested in seeing if we can move it to the parking lot as well. Those would be my thoughts. I think that we socialized it, you know, exactly as it was described, and I think going forward, you know, I would like to see it continue to be part of what we do. I think, you know, drugs are not going to be tolerated at our schools, and I feel that we have a plan that we can move forward with, as long as the board is willing to do that.
Okay. Michael? Okay.
Thank you for coming tonight. I would like to just reiterate that I'm very happy to hear that we had no drugs in the school. There were some people in the community that felt due to the excessive or lots of information going out there that there was no drugs. I personally am very happy with that. That means that they got the message that they were not going to be in the schools. If we do go forward with this, I'd be happy to see that the administration might even announce again, just reiterating, saying that we are going to look at using the dogs again sometime this year, which obviously would be a deterrent for now, and then obviously if we were to do it in the future, it would be a double deterrent. And do agree with maybe expanding the search to the parking lots and stuff within the school. But I do appreciate it. I think it went very well. I was very happy with the outcome, and hopefully it will continue in the future.
I can comment to the, we truly, one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that it was announced, that people did know that this was going to happen. Again, the first time you do it, you're trying to introduce something, so it's baby steps, and we wanted to make sure that it was done correctly. I do agree, another blanket statement, you know, if that's where you choose to go, a blanket statement now or soon that says at some point during the year. I don't think it's necessary to do it every time, but if you get it out there that there's a blanket statement sometime between now and June of 2018, it will happen. The parking lot is certainly something that we can look at. It is more extensive, but that would be up to the handlers, and it's just logistics at that point.
And I would just add, to be fair, we are talking about this as a school issue, but I would reiterate what I've said ever since I've been principal. And I think both captains would agree, it is a community issue. It's not something that's exclusive to the school, but it is in fact a community issue, and it's an issue that's pervasive in every community in America.
Okay, I've got Andy and then Cinda again.
So I agree. I was part of the group where we talked about the plan for this when we did it. I think in my mindset, we sort of went above and beyond in terms of communication the first time to sort of set the groundwork, set what would happen. I believe personally, this, and we as a board will discuss, we've done our announcement, to be honest. And I think that if we decide to use it again, there won't be an advance warning, even something that says sometime this year, because then people will say, well, you sort of pre-announced, and now people are going to be aware. So I think, in my mind, we've sort of done that, and there's a policy and a procedure in place that we've done. The other thing I would suggest is, while the parking lot is interesting, then you get into this thing about cars in school and what to do. One of the things I would encourage is we maybe go out into the grounds of the school, like dugouts and places like that, because you hear sometimes that people use the area around the school as opposed to in the school. So it might be something to consider when we go into that part, to maybe broaden the search on the school property just there to see. It's an idea, but I agree. It went well. There were some people that said, you let the cat out of the bag. It happened, and everybody didn't bring it to school. You didn't give it a fair shake. So that's sort of why I say we announced once. It's not announced again. So anyway.
Okay. And I'm just going to chime in on that. tone, and I'll give it back to you, Cinda. And I'm going to say that we probably should announce every year that, it is the, at the directive and the policy of the board that we can. And the reason is we have incoming freshmen every year, and it doesn't mean that they had high schoolers ahead of them. And for that reason, I think, when we did announce the first time and we did that very extensive communication, when you think about the tragedies that we see happening across the country in schools, for there not to be an appropriate communication of what we could be doing in the school in the lockdown situation, it always will kind of jump to a worst case scenario mindset. So just knowing that we have that option to do that, the school will go into lockdown to get that done, and then the sweep will happen very efficiently, I think is a very important communication for parents, so they don't feel their children are in any danger. And I hate to say we have to talk like this, but we do. So on that note, I definitely think an annual announcement that we have the opportunity to use drug-trained dogs, sniffing dogs, to sweep the schools and keep it the environment that we choose to have as a district, and every school does. That's going to be, we're going to do what we can to make it as a drug-free environment. Then we should just state it and let it go. And when we're ready for you and when you're ready for us, we'll make the appropriate tactics happen. So I just wanted to throw that in because on that very topic. So I will give it back over to Cinda.
Yeah, my additional comment was along the same vein, and it is that when we gave our announcement last spring, obviously the search happened, a short period of time. It was getting close to the end of the school year, and I'm okay with that. It was our first time. It was socialized. And I agree, like this time we would make an announcement, and we don't know at what point during the year that we'll be there or how many times that we'll be there, up to and including maybe the parking lot if the board agrees. I don't know if I think it has to be said every year as a special announcement, perhaps incorporated in the handbook or something like that, but definitely for this year, because it's still relatively new. But I really thank you all for the work that you did. And, one of the details that was done that I was really impressed with was, especially because this was the first time that we were doing it, it was even coordinated to have, I think you had some, like the fire department there as just kind of, who knows, just as a, worst case scenario or just as backup as part of the plan. So I feel like our police department really supported us with this search, and that they really thought of all of the details possible and tried to prepare for any details possible. And I feel that they left, really no stone unturned, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
I actually would just like to note one
absolutely.
thing, and that is everyone, unless some transferred into the high school, has been exposed to this process. So I'll listen to your direction as to whether you would like me to advise the 8th grade incoming students, before they come to the high school. And I certainly wouldn't want to speak for Adam and Shauna, but I think somehow that message should be communicated to the 8th grade prior to them coming to the high school as well, just to be fair, so that they have the same message that every other kid in the high school has currently had.
And I can say we would also, if you would like, continue the program of our canine going to the middle school to integrate the dog and to introduce the dog to the students. It's certainly something that we can do, but I'll leave that completely up to you.
Excellent. And we welcome the opportunity and the offer, so thank you.
Yes.
Cinda?
One more comment. I mean, the nice thing about the integration is that it's not just the drug sniffing dog. It's really about the benefit of this dog to the entire community and how it can save citizens if they're lost. And I went to both of those meetings with the middle school and the high school in 2016, and the students were really receptive, and just look at that beautiful dog. And really, I think that was a great way to socialize it. It's really not just the drug sniffing dog. It's the dog that does so many valuable things.
We can tell you that last week the dog did find an autistic child who wandered away from their home, so that the dog has far more benefits than just drug detection.
Right, and I think that's a really important thing. I think it's important for the kids in our district to understand that too, is the bigger picture of what benefits the dog gives to our entire community.
Yes.
And I'd also like to add, kids don't want drugs in the school. I mean, kids don't want the drugs. And I think that's important to emphasize too, because all of a sudden, often kids are, painted with a broad brush, when in all reality that's simply not the case. They don't want it. They want a clean building too. When I addressed the senior class earlier this year, I said, we're a small community here. We live with one another's decisions. Sometimes the good decisions are expected, and the bad decisions you're going to read or hear about. But I know one thing for sure, the kids don't want in the building either. They don't want in their community. That's just a fact. So.
Michael?
I'd just like to also add just a statement. I think that I speak for myself. I'm not sure about the board here, but I just wanted to put out there that we're not doing this to get kids in trouble. We're not doing it to find and punish anybody. What we're doing is just to try to remove the drugs from the school and keep them out of school. So that's the main objective, not anything about penalties or anything like that.
Gotcha. Anything else from the board? Well, thank you. And thank you for coming. And
Oh, there's no banner for us?
yeah, there's something.
No, I think I have one back in the office
Honestly, I forgot my milk bones at home
for both captains.
for Dallas.
I'm
So.
part of that banner.
Thank you very much. Absolutely, you are right. That's
Thank you very
good.
much for having us, and we do want to continue with the partnership that we have with you. So,
I should point that out, though. The police presence at our games is very important to help maintain sportsmanship, so we never want to take that for granted. And that is a big deal, and you are at just about every basketball game as a former player, right?
Wow.
I am.
There you go. Excellent.
There you go.
Thank you both
Thank
captains
you
for
all.
coming tonight.
We're on to, yes.
I think I'm staying.
And we're on to item number 5, which is the information regarding the Running Start program at Merrimack High School with Mike Susi. Many hats tonight, Mike.
Many hats.
Get that button to speak into it.
Thank you. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the Running Start offerings that we have at Merrimack High School, and I can say that there's a little bit difference between the Running Start programs and our dual enrollment programs. So we actually offer 2 different types of programs. Running Start is offered through Nashua Community College, and we have 2 different classes that we offer it at. Our English 12 class that seniors can take is offered at the Running Start level. And then we also offer Marketing 2 from our business department through Nashua Community College as a Running Start program as well. They're great opportunities for students because it gives them an opportunity or chance anyway after successful completion to gain some college credit. And there's over 200 colleges and universities in the country that do accept the Running Start credit upon admission to the school. So it's very advantageous to the kids if they want to take on that challenge. And it is certainly a challenge. There is more work associated with these classes, and there's more responsibility on the student's part. So it is certainly something that they need to really think about in order to do. But ultimately, it can really save them some significant amount of money down the road when you think that a college class is going to cost them anywhere between $1,000 and $1,800 prior to purchasing books. They can do these classes for a nominal fee of $150. So it's certainly well worth their time and effort, provided they want to put in that extra effort that is a part of that class. We also offer 2 dual enrollment programs with Southern New Hampshire University, again through our business department. So we offer sports and events management, and we offer accounting 3 through that program. So there's a lot of chances for kids to gain an opportunity outside of the AP curriculum to earn some college credit upon graduation from high school. So really great programs. Those 2 programs are $100 for the credit, so it's well worth their time and effort. And I know that the teachers, at least for the business courses, will typically ask the students to do a little bit of research ahead of time to make sure that the colleges that they're planning to attend are going to accept it, because in those classes the curriculum is the same whether they're doing the dual enrollment program or they're not. So why spend the money if the college isn't going to accept the credit? So they do a little bit of advanced research for that. But they're great opportunities for our students for sure.
Andy?
So a couple of things. Could you go a little bit about the qualifications that the instructors need to have in order to do this, and also whether you have any plans to extend the program at all to other subjects or other capabilities?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about the qualifications. Certainly for the Running Start programs, they're very specific. They do expect that our teachers have a master's degree in the curriculum that they're teaching. There are some exceptions to that, but that is what their expectation is. There is certainly a fair amount of additional work for our teachers because they have to kind of dual grade. They've got a grade for our curriculum and they've got a grade for the Running Start program as well. They also have to go through an additional observation because the staff at the community college will come and observe their classroom as well. So there's a little bit more on our teachers from an administrative standpoint as well. As far as rolling it out to other disciplines, that is an administrative, I guess, decision, and I'm not privy to that.
And Mike, just one clarification. I know that at one point we were offering Mandarin 4 through SNHU. Is that a dual enrollment program then?
I think that was a dual enrollment program. I'm not sure if that's still moving forward or not.
Okay.
But you're accurate. You are accurate. It was a dual enrollment program. Yes.
Because that was with Southern New Hampshire University as well, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. So are there any questions of the board? Michael?
I think this is a great opportunity for the students, don't want to call them children, students to be able to obviously get a chance to look at the college prep and stuff like that. I know that I went through seeing the honors program at the 9th freshman orientation. I thought it was great to see the vigorous education for, I think, what was it, I forget what it's called. You were there. What class is it?
It's World Civilizations, so it's English and Humanities.
But I really see that the opportunity for the kids to excel in the high school is readily available, and I do appreciate it, and hopefully maybe it will continue to expand as the children see other ways to, or sorry, students see other ways to take advantage of it. Thanks.
Sure.
So I actually had a question, and I know that we talked about Running Start and we talked about dual enrollment, but when a student is deciding between dual enrollment or Running Start, and I know English 12 came up. So what would be the strategy for deciding whether English 12 at National Community College or AP English would be the best choice? So what kind of guidance, since you're in guidance, can you give parents as far as what the differentiators are and advantages and disadvantages?
Well, the curriculum for the AP is determined by the College Board, and so that can change from one year to the next. The curriculum for the Running Start program is very writing intensive, so it's really intended to prepare them, or really get them through their freshman English 101, that composition class in college. And so while they do certainly study the literature piece and component in the English Running Start, they really focus heavily on the writing. They do an additional research paper and another additional piece of writing as well. So they're doing 2 research papers instead of 1, and other writing on top of that too. So while they are still working through some literature, it's really intensive on the writing. And so if that's their goal, is to really improve on their writing or really get through that English 101 for college, then I would certainly recommend the Running Start.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
While I'm here, if I could just steal a little thunder.
Sure.
I just want to say that Mike, as you can see, is exceptionally gifted in the spoken word. He's also gifted in the written word. He has served the high school with distinction as a counselor and has served the state and a fellow high school as a coach. And I believe and have the absolute confidence that he is going to be an outstanding athletic director for our kids. And just wanted to take this public moment to welcome him aboard.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you. We're excited about a good year for you. So
Thank you.
Lots to think about.
For sure.
Excellent. Any other questions of Running Start, dual enrollment, AP, athletics, any of it? Nothing? Okay. We have them live right now. Okay. Well, we will look forward to a good year and good luck in your transition to your new role.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Excellent. And we're on to item number 6, which is the homework protocol implementation. At our last board meeting, under, I guess, new business, maybe some comments. There was a little bit of both. But we wanted to talk about how the new homework protocols are being implemented at the high school. So we asked if Mark could prepare some items for tonight's meeting and present it to us and make it kind of easier for our parents at home to understand what this new protocol means for their students. So Mark is changing seats as setting up, and hopefully I was stalling, so I hope that worked out. So to cue him up, and we'll get a practical view. So thank you, Mark. The mic is yours.
Thank you. All right. There we go. Okay. So first of all, I just want to clarify that this is actually not just the high school. This is a district initiative that's impacting K to 12, and I don't know if you can see. There we go. Excellent. Okay. Every initiative starts with a problem set or questions or circumstances. So what I tell you is that last year we began at the elementary level, we began a standards-based report card committee that's looking to revise our elementary report card. That's been in place for a long, long time. And before we wanted to do something like that, there were some fundamental questions that we needed to ask ourselves about how we grade and what's included in the grade and so on. So it was a natural place to talk about homework and a lot of things. In addition, we thought that it was important that it not just become a question at the elementary level, but at the secondary level as well. And so we tackled the issue of homework in two different places, one at the elementary level through the Standards-Based Report Card Committee, and another through about 6 months of meetings at the secondary level that included the high school and the middle school. And in addition to that, periodically teachers and parents express questions and concerns about homework and so on. So all of that seemed to gel to be a perfect time to say, okay, what are we going to, how are we going to tackle this? And so we really developed three overarching questions. One is, what is the purpose of homework? Two, are current practices achieving the intended purpose? And three, can we improve? And it's the third question that I hope is familiar to the board, because we often talk in district about not trying to rest on our laurels and because something has always happened or always been effective, that it will always be effective. So we generally always adopt the answer yes to the third question, could we improve? And the answer typically is yes. And so we felt like this is a case where we might be able to improve. So after a lot of discussion at those two levels that I described to you, we really developed three basic principles that were going to drive the work that we did. And one was a question of academic integrity, and that is, do grades accurately reflect performance? And that's a really important question, because in the standards-based environment, we owe it to our students and our families to provide information that really accurately reflects what a student knows and is able to do with whatever learning is presented to them. And in order to present a clear picture of that, you have to make sure that there's integrity in the grades that you're recording and making judgment on. And so we questioned the role of homework in regards to developing an accurate profile of a student's academic ability, because there are cases, many cases, where students don't do their homework, and when called upon in any variety of measures, whether it's a traditional test or a project or report, manage to do very well or sometimes exceptionally well. But if we were to factor in, let's say, not having done their homework into that grade set, where a student can produce clear demonstration of ability, that it would deflate a grade and it wouldn't be an accurate reflection of what they know and can do. It would be integrating something about compliance or responsibility, which, while important, isn't part of an academic record. And conversely, you could have a situation where a student is very compliant and passes in his or her homework all the time, and then when called upon to demonstrate their ability in a variety of measures, can't seem to quite produce an ability to demonstrate that they know it. So, but their grade is inflated by the fact that they complied with the request to do homework. And so if the question is, can we stand behind the grade that we're giving, we think we can improve upon that by trying to keep the homework out of the picture when it comes to developing a record of what a student is able to know or be able to do. The second principle had to do with equity. And the questions that we really asked around that are two. Are homework practices consistently applied across the district? So the homework policy, and I want to make this very clear because there was some misunderstanding, I think, in the public. This is not a new policy. The policy that was adopted by the board is still fully in place and fully supported by the board and the administration. So that's number one. But the policy doesn't specifically talk about grading. And so it was left to individual teachers to make a judgment about whether they would include homework in a grade or not include homework in a grade, or how much they'd include it. So we had some folks who might nominally say it was worth 5% and some who would say it was worth 30 or 40% of a grade. Well, it's a big difference. And so the answer to the question, are homework practices consistently applied across the district, was no. And for the sake of equity, it seemed to make sense that we try to adopt practices that would be more universally applied. And then, is homework support equal for all students? And this is as a parent of 2 students, and my wife and I are very actively engaged in our students, we bump up against the line all the time about how much help is too much help. So on the one hand, we want to support our students and help them to comply with what's asked of them. And it's very easy to overstep. And it's all well-intentioned, but if sometimes there is a certain level of support at home that is different from the level of support that another student receives, there really isn't equity in how to assess the value of that work as it contributes to an academic grade. That's just a fact. And if we're trying to build in equity, that was something that we needed to really consider. The third principle had to do with personal responsibility. And that really comes down to the question of incentives, because when this question of to ask of teachers, why would you grade homework? The answer is a variation on a theme, which is, well, how else do you make sure that a student does it? And so then the question is, well, how is that working? And the answer is it's working for students, it would seem, who generally are inclined to do their homework, and it's not proving to be terribly effective for students who are generally not inclined to do their homework. So as an incentive, it seems to have mixed results. So if you go back to equity, it's not an incentive isn't an entirely equitable practice. Do incentives teach responsibility? Which leads into the third question, do incentives lead to sustained practice? So the question there is, what is the role and purpose of homework? And by and large, there's general agreement that homework is intended to provide practice for students to be able to get better at the work that they're asked to do. And so it should be understood by students at very young ages and their parents that doing homework is really for your own good. And so the sooner that we try to instill that sense that this is sort of your job is to be as good a learner as you can be, and here are things we're going to give you to help you become a better learner, and it's your job to do them. It has been pointed out a number of times to me over the years that we're trying to teach students to be successful in the quote-unquote real world, and it's a rare event that I know of where a person in their job is asked to do something, and then if they do it well, that they're given an extra $50 in their paycheck. I mean, if there's a job, you do your job. And this is the expectation of our students. If homework is an expectation, do your homework. And the question of incentives has not proven to be a slam dunk when it comes to their working or not. So the idea that homework is offered, it's developmentally appropriate as the policy requires, and that it's an individual student's responsibility to do it if they need to do it. And if they don't need to do it, and their grade reflects on a lot of rigorous measures that they can demonstrate their content skill and mastery, then their having done their homework or not really didn't factor. And if the student doesn't typically do his or her homework, and there's a correlation to that and poor performance, then there ought to be an understanding that, well, maybe if we increase our practice, we'll do better on the measures that we have in place to help you demonstrate what you know. So I just wanted, in letters that I've sent home, I've included the homework policy and then the revised or the new homework protocol. And I've just highlighted in yellow, just because sometimes it's easier to see bright colors, areas where the current policy and the revised protocol are really speaking the same language. So in the homework policy, it says homework is a constructive tool in the teaching learning process when geared to the needs and abilities of students. So if you go down to the homework protocol, it says homework is intended to support learning by providing opportunities for practice based on the differentiated needs of students. So all the homework protocol is intended to do, the new practice that we're introducing, is to make the policy come to life, which is that homework is supposed to be geared to the needs of students. So if Board Member Gualiumi needs to practice addition and subtraction, and Chair Barnes needs to work on multiplication, then it would seem like the homework ought to be geared to the needs of those people and not just a one-size-fits-all. Well, why don't you all do math? Why don't you all do subtraction and addition? So we are trying to fine-tune that process of calibrating a homework assignment to the needs of a student. And then you all can read as well as I can, but between the policy and the practice, we're trying to just talk about the developmental needs of students, trying to give them opportunities for practice, and then saying that the responsibility of noncompliance falls on the student. And the way that will be most demonstrated is in a sort of a summative assessment that's given, which isn't always just a paper pencil test. Sometimes it's a project, sometimes it's an essay, sometimes it's a group work, it's a demonstration in a variety of innovative ways to allow a student to be able to demonstrate what he or she knows and is able to do, because it isn't always one size fits all that way either. There are some students who aren't great test takers, but they can demonstrate their knowledge in a variety of ways. So we're trying to increase the number of ways that a teacher provides those opportunities to students. And so really we have three takeaways that I'd just like to leave the board and the community with, which is that homework is a tool to assist a student to practice skills and content. Contrary to what I think was initially believed in the public, homework is a very active tool in our district. It has not gone away. It's an active tool. It has a valid purpose, and nothing about that has changed. A second takeaway is that completion of homework is a student responsibility, and I've spoken to that. And this is not just my belief. This is the result of conversation with teachers at the committee level, at the elementary and secondary levels. And the development of homework assignments consisted with district policy is a teacher's responsibility, and that's outlined in the policy. And so we've had a lot of conversations with teachers at every level about what differentiated homework looks like, what it means. In many cases, that's done already, just second nature. For those for whom it isn't exactly second nature, we're really working with them to get better at that. For students who aren't necessarily great test takers who have relied on homework to sort of boost their grade, I would just say that there are lots and lots and lots of very valid ways that we can assess what a student can know and be able to do that are beyond a paper pencil test, and we are implementing those daily and weekly and working to that end. We've been doing that for a long time. and we're going to continue to do that. But the bottom line is we're trying to have grades reflect what a student knows and is able to do academically. And the introduction of other factors complicates that and doesn't paint, we feel, the kind of picture that would be most helpful to parents and students when they're trying to figure out what can my child do with what they've been taught. As to the implementation of this, I would say that in many cases throughout the district, what I've described here has been the practice of many for a long time. And so for those teachers, it's not a big deal. For those who have relied on grades, graded homework, it has been a big deal. And they are continuing to process through what it means. I would expect that they would. And they have been very forthcoming with their building leadership with me. We maintain open dialogue about how we will continue to get better and improve. And the thing that I say to the board a lot is that when any new practice or policy, not in this case, it's not a new policy, but a new practice or a new initiative is introduced, there's clearly a curve of comfort. And we generally find in this district, and I think we're lucky because of it, that teachers with a little time rise to the occasion and exceed. And in the meantime, we're certainly not using students as a guinea pig to work out our process. We very much are aware that grades matter to students and matter to parents, and so we're taking that into account when we are considering this practice. But when we were working on EPEC, I remember Tricia Swanger once said, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good," and that applies here as well. So we are very mindful that there are processes and things here that can be improved, that require additional follow-up and work, and we know it, as we know with every other thing we've tried to do, and we are really committed to doing that. But felt like it was important to introduce a new practice for the reasons that I said here, just so that we can continue to improve what we do. I'm sure you have questions, and I'm happy to take them.
Other questions from the board? We'll let Andy go first on this one.
There's probably several, and many of these are probably fed by questions that we've either been asked or might not have, so I'll ask just a couple. So first of all, just to make sure that we're clear, when a homework assignment is assigned and the student returns it in, even though they don't get a grade, they'll receive the homework back with more than just that they did it, but rather an evaluation of what they did right, what they did wrong for their own knowledge, correct?
That's correct, and that's stipulated in the policy. Let me just try to get that back. Right
in the
here.
Policy or in the protocol?
In the policy. It says, as an extension of the classroom, homework must be planned and organized, must be viewed as purposeful to the students, and should be evaluated and returned to students in a timely manner. That's in our policy.
Okay.
And so nothing about that has changed. That is always good practice to do. Why else would you assign homework if it weren't going to be reviewed and evaluated? And by evaluated meaning, hey, we asked you to work on fractions. Questions 4, 5, 7, and 10, you seem to not have done well on. So let's take this as a baseline. Here's what I'm seeing you're doing right or wrong. Here's why I want you to continue to practice. Otherwise, there should be no homework given if it's not going to be reviewed, and that's district policy.
Okay.
Yep.
Because it seemed to have, in the fervor of the fallout of the last discussion, which happened in social media and several other places, there was an assumption that that was falling by the wayside too. So I asked it more to feed into the conversation that that's still a part of the policy, and still the way that you're implementing this, based on the policy through the no grading concept, but at least the correction. The other question I had is, and I know I asked this, we don't talk much about homework's role in the overall grade. We talk about letter grade and stuff, but we don't talk about competency and how homework might have a role in competencies, and when you look at remediation and things like that. Does completion of homework sort of help if a student needs remediation because of whatever, because either their grades or the competencies are not being met or are borderline. Can you talk a little bit about the value of homework into that bigger picture?
Teachers talk about that all the time. So, what a competency, so for those who aren't familiar with the term, a competency is a way that a student can demonstrate what he or she knows according to a set of standards or competencies. And so part of the value of a competency is that it allows a more targeted discussion that a teacher can have with a student. So in the past, if you got a B, the question is, well, what is a B's worth of knowing? If you get a B and you didn't get an A, that must be some part of what you were taught that you didn't know, but what would that be? And when you average everything together and divide it by the number of assignments and get a numerical grade, there's your B. But if I'm a parent or a student, I'm not really sure necessarily what that B means. So in a competency, you've got it broken down into certain skill sets or concept sets. And so you could know, for instance, that you have an excellent ability to organize your paragraphs, but you'd meet competency there, but you're a poor grammarian. And so you would not have met competency here. So now I know more specifically the kinds of things that I'm really good at and can work to get better at, and the kinds of things that I'm not great at and I need to work to improve. And homework is a way to have that conversation with a student to say, I'm going to give you these practice sets. It's drill and kill. I know it's probably going to be boring. Thousands of ways that you talk to a kid, but you say, but you know what? This is really going to be good. And if you just practice this a little bit, I bet you the next time you come to this, you'll be able to be better, because why would you expect to be a good basketball player if you never, practice your layups, right? So everybody can understand that. It isn't always as clear for students when it comes to homework. So there's obviously a correlation, and teachers talk to students about that all the time. And you can get very targeted with a competency, because you can say, Andy, here's where you're not really succeeding great. So I'm going to give you homework focused on that. Practice it. But it's up to you to practice it. You got to do it. I can't make you do it, and I can't make you understand it. But if you practice, you come in, now we've got something that we can mutually talk about, which is how you did on your homework, so that then I can lift you out of that confusion to a better place. So that happens all the time.
Are there any other questions? Michael?
I'm not sure if it's a question or just more of comment. Appreciate you coming tonight, and obviously, well, you're here every time that we're here, but appreciate presenting tonight on the matter. I'm very, I guess, in favor of the policy itself. I feel that it's an opportunity for parents also to be involved and understand what their kids do have a competency for. I can give you an example of a couple scenarios where if I were to have known this policy, I might have let my child stop some of the homework, because I could see that they were competent in it and didn't need to do the 70 math problems that they had given that night. So there's benefits to this, that you can allow your child to understand what they need to understand and take away some of the overburden. But I think what will happen is it might flush out some of those 70 question problems per night, because the teachers might start to not see them all done and said, okay, I got it at this point, we're good. I also think it's an opportunity to flush out some of the monotonous homework that has been given in the past, and I know that it's been discussed in the administration where, just to give you an example, my child came home with a coloring project for a math project, and it was straight coloring. It had nothing to do with the math at the time. So I think there's great opportunity here to do that. I also think that's something that you had brought up, where you can start to provide guidance to an individual student instead of blanket guidance for an entire class. I think that's an opportunity for a teacher to say, hey, you know what, you need a little help here. Hey, you're great. Why don't you go try to do something else to kind of extend it even further? So I think that's great. I would like an assessment to just understand how this got out of control so quickly. So like students coming home and saying, I don't have to do homework. What was the miscommunication or misunderstanding from either the miscommunication from the teachers or the misunderstanding from the students, and how we could actually do that better in the future so that we can kind of not have the same scenario that blew up on social media, which if we can figure that out, I think that will be a different, we could probably solve world peace at the same time. But are you understanding what I'm saying? Like, what happened that we got from the teachers explaining it to the students coming home and telling their parents that they didn't have to do homework? So I know that you don't have any, you can't explain it tonight, but I think that we should maybe dive into that a little bit more and try to figure that out. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think it's worth investigating. You know, I've reflected, and some of you have asked me to think about that, you know, question. I really can't speak to people's use of social media as a tool for communication. It's not my preferred tool. However, I do think that in retrospect, there could have been a better way to roll this out. But having said that, and I really mean this in all honesty, I'm not sure how, and that's my being as honest with you as I can be. This was pretty much wrapped up in terms of how we were going to proceed at the end of last year, and I hear from every principal and teacher, it's a terrible time of year to introduce a whole new big thing when people are trying to wrap up a year. And so, not a good time. And I agree, that's been my experience as a teacher. And then the question is, well, in the summer, well, as the automotive issue was a good example, trying to just get a handful of people to know what we were doing about automotive proved to be very difficult in the course of a summer. So to roll out a big piece of information in the summer when you can't guarantee where people are is not really a very good practice either. So now we're at the beginning of the year, and it was always the intention to communicate to parents about, you know, a week after school started, so that people could just get their feet under them. It's a new school year, and here's this, and so on, because certainly homework isn't a big deal in the days between the first day of school and Labor Day. But it became a big deal quickly. How people interpreted that, I take responsibility that somehow it got misinterpreted. I can't, so to your question, I mean, I can't understand exactly how that happened, but I take responsibility that it happened, and will really reflect on that as I consider in the future, you know, how things like this get rolled out.
Have the mic.
I guess what I'm kind of asking is going back to the teachers and maybe even asking them how they presented it to the children, and getting a survey of the teachers. Sorry to kind of put it out, but I know that when one of my children came home and said we don't have to do homework, I told them good luck with that, because I knew that I was going to make sure that he was doing homework so that he could understand, obviously, what he was kind of doing. So that's an example of obviously how I interpreted that if you get homework, you should be at least able to understand it and do it. So I'm just asking that we should kind of go back to the sources and say how did they present it, and kind of just understanding if the teachers presented it one way and the students interpret it another way, then maybe that's in the future not the way to actually present it at all. Maybe it has to go to the parents first before the children. I'm just kind of giving an example that I definitely want a little bit more information on this, because I think that it wasn't just social media. Obviously social media blew it up even more, but my child came home and said I don't have to do homework. So I'm sure that the teacher did not present it that way, but maybe it's not the right line of communication for a 7th grader as an example. So thanks.
Yeah, and I would have to say the one thing that your letter did state, and I think it's so important, if you read nothing in that letter, you read the part that the district, the teachers, the principals, the superintendents are always available to talk. I mean, I don't think social media is the answer. When you have a question about your child's education, I think the question belongs with your educators. the ones that will be delivering that education to your child and will be invested in that child's school year as much as you are, and invested in their success and their growth. So that's why they come to school every day. That's why they put in the time they do. So I really can't say enough that when parents have a question or concern, the first place it's appropriate to go is the one who can address that concern directly. So I think that's very important. And, social media, I think, created a panic because there was no moderator who had the understanding of what the protocol meant. And so it was people with what I would call minimal information, gathering their exchanging notes on their interpretation of what this protocol meant. And the district is always a phone call away, an email away. Your teachers are all on the website. Those teachers all have links to email. Any questions, any concerns, communication is key for them to make sure that they're creating a learning environment that's successful for all those students to really thrive. So I can't say that enough. What I would like to see, I think, would be if we can get even a structured communication. I know we always look to do SurveyMonkey or parent-teacher conferences are coming up. This is not the time. We haven't spent enough time with that protocol. But as parent-teacher conferences are coming up, get feedback there. As you're presenting, hopefully by after midterms, to see where this protocol adjustment, impacts the quality of the student's performance. I think we always want to look at that. And then, of course, how the parents help to navigate that. As a parent of two high schoolers, we're invested in this process as well, because we don't want our children to, use it as an excuse not to put their full effort in either. So that feedback on how students are using that information is also very important. So how are they investing in it? So I think there's multiple touch points we can play with here. So I think we have a great opportunity to do that. This school year, I think, should be a complete learning process. We should continue to get those touch points and those communications back and forth with students, parents, and teachers on how we can roll it out most successfully. I saw Naomi, and then I'll do Andy. It seems like we're going to go around. So we'll start with Naomi, Andy, Cinda, and then back to Michael.
I had a couple of thoughts to share on this, and they're more for the general conversation than a question in particular. The first has to do with the change itself, which I've said before that I think is a wonderful thing, and I'm very glad to see happening. Sometimes it helps to flip it around, just in case anybody listening or such has any doubt still, and look at it the other way around and think that if we had in place the policy that was just created, so we had been for doing 10 years, what we just put in place, and then came forward and said that we wanted to add incorrect homework as a bonus onto grades, whether that's something that we would consider acceptable or not. I was surprised we were doing it, frankly, to hear when I heard about it. And so this, as far as I'm concerned, is a wonderful fix. Now, at the same time, I was very surprised. I do not have children in the district. And so for me, it was the extent to which parents and students were concerned with this change was very interesting and very illuminating. And I think reminded me that homework is one of the biggest touch points we have with families every single day. And that when we're going to do something that affects grades or homework that may seem small in the scheme of the district, it may loom very, very large to families and to students if they don't have a very strong understanding of what's going on. And I think they've expressed that to us very, very clearly through this, that people were taken by surprise for whatever reason, and that scared them a bit and made them concerned for their students and for their students' grades. I think that's useful information to have. I have one thing that occurred to me while I was listening, and that is students with special needs. There may be a need to go and look at IEPs or look at the ways that those are implemented to make sure that these are students who don't need additional support surrounding homework now that the grade specifically doesn't address it for them. I don't know if it's been done yet, but it might be something worth looking at. And that's my pieces.
Thanks. I think I have Andy, then Cinda, and then back to Michael.
So my kids are all graduated. So I'm sort of in this unique position that I don't get all these updates or any emails or anything that goes to parents. So when I first heard about this, the first place I went to look was the PowerSchool parent portal or the PowerSchool, the daily, whatever it's called, the daily announcement or whatever the PowerSchool is, because I view that as where a parent will go to find out what's new, what's important, what's changed, whatever like that. So when you talk about communication, I think parents will go to wherever they think the information is. And if they go to the portal and they find nothing's there, or they go to the website and there's nothing there, they don't always look at the parent guide because there's a lot of stuff in there. You don't see the thing. And I think where we need to pick a place for this sort of information on all the different schools and be consistent in terms of that. And you could have flagged, as in 2020 hindsight, you could have flagged, hey, everybody look in your student guide for your different school to see this change of what we've done, and any questions, talk to your whatever. That would have probably solved half the problem, at least from people there. But the problem is, and I'll take crap for this, I'm sure, there's a mob mentality in Facebook these days, especially in the Merrimack Forum. Today, a topic about the $50 parking fee for Merrimack High School students exploded in a direction that I never expected. So I think we as a board and administration need to understand that if you don't give enough information in a consistent place that people go, people will start raising it in places where there is no moderation, where there is no expert or whatever. It's a lot of hearsay, innuendo. Back when I did it, it was this, or I believe it should be this. And that's what happened, and that's how this thing blew. I mean, the homework, the Facebook forum thread that had homework in it had over 450 replies, which I've never seen anything to that extent in Facebook with a topic. So I think what this shows us is that we need to be very proactive in terms of communication, pick a methodology that works, something that all the parent would tend to go to look first. Just try to stem it, if you will, because social media will take on a life of its own if you let it.
Can I just comment on that?
Of course you should.
So, yes, I mean, certainly lots and lots of lessons learned. I will just say that while I hear that completely, I think I've got to say what is on my mind about that, which is that we have to be careful to not be so quick to answer that we rush and answer wrong, or just rush to say something because it's out there. And there's a temptation to do that. Clearly, my plan didn't work. My plan was on the first day of the first, let's say the day after Labor Day. So we're in for a few days, take a long weekend, come back. Now your head's really on, the year has started. That was my plan. Clearly, that was an error. And but it wasn't that the goal wasn't to communicate. It was sometimes you cannot, and I don't mean this as it's life and it's the way it is, but sometimes you can't anticipate, and perhaps there are people who said, well, this is one you should have. And hindsight, yes, it's certainly one I should have. But I think the temptation sometimes to rush to answer can get us in more trouble than trying to be thoughtful. And there was a plan, and it was generally so that people could get their feet under them and start the year. Homework isn't really a big deal in those first couple of days. So to Board Member Thompson's point, how it might have been communicated such that, in the first couple of days it was sort of raised as a big thing that people felt the need then to talk about. It's worth, it's like a case study, and I take it as that, and I will happily look at it. But, I just would say, literally large parts of every day could be spent responding to what's out there, and I don't know that that's the most productive use of anybody's time, particularly when you are trying to get accurate information and then, do it right.
Just to something that you said is something that I think is the real key here, and that's anticipate what the effect would be. It's sort of like, if I'm going to put this together and I send it out, what do I think the reaction would be? Because I do this all the time. Especially social media is one of these. You type it in, and then you take a step back and say, okay, if I say this, what's the reaction going to be, right? It's sort of it's a new skill that I think a lot of us have, that if you go and you just plop something out without thinking, then maybe you said something wrong, then somebody will pick or whatever. So I agree. You don't react to social media and start answering everything there. But I think it's a learning that we all need to do is when we do any sort of communication, you type it up, you do it, take a step back, have somebody else look at it or whatever, and make sure that the intent is there. Because I think anticipating what people might say is something that I know that I struggle with every day, and I think that's the one learning I think we can take from this is, was this clear? What do you think people will say? And it's just a 20/20 hindsight thing, I think. So,
Right.
Cinda?
First of all, I'm supportive of this protocol. I think there's some really great things that it does. I think that the reaction, the surprise reaction that we've received or that maybe we feel as parents has to do a lot with really what our beliefs are and our experiences are around homework. We all have that history of what homework means to me. And so this protocol kind of changes that a little bit from an entirely different angle. And maybe not as much as one might think, because we have all of these ideas with what homework is, what it has been for us, what it was for us, and so on and so forth. But what I like about it is I like what you said and what I think this does, which is not make everyone a blanket student. It's not student it's not everyone being treated the same. It allows for degrees of learning, which undoubtedly there are different degrees of learning in any class. As much as the class might be the same, you have people that are not the same. So I think that it allows for that approach to individualize some education for students. I think that became even more clear to me when I went to the high school last week, and really the way that this protocol integrates with the supports that are at the high school, for example, of labs that they can go to with a study hall and the paras that are supporting the teachers, and kind of some of the discussions that we had around the special ed approach or the approach for folks in being able to benefit a lot of students, even though we have these resources that are paras that can work with some of our students with special needs, as well as, well, I'll get to that in a second. So there's that. I'm very supportive of that, and I can kind of see the big picture of how this can be really effective. I also had the concerns about special needs in that, it is a protocol that's rolled out kind of mid-flight for some people that are in special needs that maybe might need accommodations. I don't know what they might be. That it might change the way they might need accommodations, perhaps. I don't know. It's just something that crossed my mind. But on the other hand, I also believe that there are some changes that have happened in this district that allow maybe support of some special needs students without, how do I want to say that, without maybe more discrete support of special needs in a way that integrates them more with a more typical student. So those are my initial thoughts. The only thing I can think of from rolling out something like this is, maybe that there's this question and answer. It might be too late probably for some cases, but like all of the open houses that happen like in the fall, that maybe a few minutes early there could have been a question and answer, or there was very specific maybe communication distributed to the teachers regarding questions that parents might have for this, or so on and so forth. But all in all, I think hindsight is 20/20. I think that this is a positive thing, and I think it is something good when you look at education overall. And I commend you for, I think, keeping up with some of the things that in the district itself, for keeping up with some of the, I think, trends in education that will help students be successful.
Michael?
I'd first like to thank you for saying that you've made an error and that you've learned from it, and I think that's great. I have a saying that I use in my line of work, that's fail faster. The faster you fail, the faster you'll learn from it, the faster you move on. So I definitely appreciate that. I know that you can't anticipate everything, so I think that's a great statement that you made earlier. I did want to follow up on a couple statements. I don't feel that this policy is really something to learn from this year. I think that you've been learning from it for quite some years, so I think that this is just a year that it will continue the process that you've been going through for years. And I think that I just want to touch on that it's not something that you're just deploying this year. It's more of and this wasn't your statement. I also want to just follow up on, I know that we kind of harped on social media a lot, but in this case, social media just blew it up a little bit more, but I don't think social media was the issue itself. It was just something that kind of expanded the issue beyond because of the communication that people chose to go to instead of other lines that Chairman Barnes talked about, going to the teacher and stuff like that. And I also wanted to point out that based off the crowd that is here tonight, meaning that there really isn't one, I think that the process that we've gone through and actually speaking to it and you sending out a letter has helped to kind of put this to rest a little bit, I hope. And everybody has learned what the policy is a little bit more about tonight. So thank you.
So as a closing of many of our exciting topics, and this is definitely one that is exciting, I think that if there's opportunity to put the presentation that you just presented on our website for parents to reference, I think that would be a great tool. So I'm sure our fellow board members love to get more information out as well. So if we can get that, that'd be great.
Will do.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Then we will close this topic and make Mark go to his primary seat. And we'll turn the mic over to Marge and Matt, and that is to go over the proposed capital improvement plan from 2018 to 2024.
Thank you. So I'm going to start out and just review the process for putting the capital improvement plan together for the next 6 years, because I think that's terribly important. And that is to say that Matt and I worked together at the beginning of September to look at items, projects that we had on the capital improvement plan to see whether we felt they should stay in the designated year or whether they should be moved. And when we completed that effort, we then took the document to the Planning and Building Committee for their review. And you can see by looking at the document that 2 changes were made, and the Planning and Building Committee approved it. And then obviously tonight is the first night that we put it before you. I want to point out that one item that we did not address, and we did it on purpose, is the consolidation of the Student Services and SAU offices. And we didn't put it in a given year of the 6 because we really feel that the board is engaged in a major discussion about multiple options. And until the option is determined by the board, it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense for us to plot it somewhere, because it really comes down to what is it that you might want to do, be it build a new structure or renovate an existing structure or whatever. More conversation has gone on about the particular consolidation, I think, during this period of time than has gone on in a lot of years, meaning before we would plot a number, but we really didn't discuss necessarily a particular structure. And now you're very engaged in that process. And I'm pleased to say that not only did Matt and I feel strongly about that when we worked together, but I'm so happy that the Planning and Building Committee really seemed to understand what we were saying to them, and they didn't force the issue either. But in fact, want to be, I would say, partners with you as you go about deliberating about what might be for our future. So I set the stage saying those things, and I want to turn it over to Matt so that he can walk through the document, and also want to point out that something that the chairman requested that we did not put in your packet was the schedule of bonded debt. And I know that you look very closely at that schedule at bonded debt relative to what it is we're proposing to see what makes most sense for the good of our taxpayers and the good of our system. So with
Yeah.
that's the general
Yes,
statement.
thank you. Yeah, so the ever-popular schedule of bonded debt you have with you at your place. And the capital improvement plan that was approved by the Planning and Building Committee on September 11th. In prior years, I had done a PowerPoint, and I'm probably going to do that for the next meeting. This is just to kind of get you started as to what we're thinking about. The first item is being roofing. You know, we've been about doing roofs every year for quite a bit of years. This is basically what was on the plan last year. So what happened to Thornton's Ferry last year was the 1997 additions were done. And so Reed's Ferry for 18-19, that would be the portion of that school that would be looked at. Then it goes out to 1920 to the upper elementary school, Thornton's Ferry, anything that was not part of those 97 additions, which is the remainder of the school, would get done. Then there's a piece of the elementary school, Mastrocola, and the upper elementary school for $838,000, and then there's MES and JMU's for $617,200. And on the bottom debt, the bonded debt piece, you see another piece for $361,000, and I just neglected to map that out and tell you what building that was in the CIP. So every year, as we've done in the past, there is a certain amount for roofing to be done, with a high year in 2021. Maybe as we get closer to that, or we deliberate, maybe there'd be a natural split where we could look at that and try and lessen the impact, split it into 2 years, something like that, depending upon how the roof sections build up. But that's the way it's been plotted in the past, so we just kind of kept with the program for this point in time. Another area we have is the paving of O'Gara Drive and the sidewalk on O'Gara Drive. We know that there is going to be perhaps something concerning central office at some point in time. That site was considered at the end of O'Gara Drive a potential landing spot for a new office, and if it does indeed go there, it would be best to do all the construction on the building if that was indeed the site, and then afterwards come back and then do paving and do sidewalks once all the heavy work is done. So that's basically why that was pushed out to 2021. Completing that sidewalk would take it from Babusick Lake Road all the way to the up O'Gara Drive to where the first parking lot is for the high school students. So that's kind of a want and a need of the town center committee, which I sit on, to kind of complete that loop. And I do, during the course of the day, see a lot of people doing that loop, going around the high school in front of the upper elementary school and back and forth. So that's on there too. There are other paving projects that we have, and one that's really come to the surface is Thornton's Ferry Circle in the lower lot. We've talked about that for a number of years. I have pictures of it that I took last year. I'm going to take some new pictures this year. But that circle is pretty atrocious right now. I would say that's definitely more than necessary, as is the lower lot that we have. Then equally, the next year, 1920, we talk about Mastrocola Elementary School and the JMU's entrance lot next to School Street. It's right where parents go in, that parking lot off in front of them, kind of towards the right of the main entrance. We would be wanting to do that, plus the entrance area in front of Mastrocola. We have two other items on here for 21, 22, and 23, 24 that we put them down there because we have to start thinking about that, because driving around and looking at the state of things, especially after we did the front of the high school and the bus loop and everything like that, I was looking at the front of the high school, the McElwain side where Brentwood is and where Special Services is, that big main parking lot where we used to have the motorcycle riding program. That's really getting to the point where there's a lot of cracks in there, there's a lot of depressions in there, there's a lot of issues with drainage and whatnot, and it hasn't been done probably in a good 20 years, I would say. Could be a little bit more than that. Same thing with the student parking lots along O'Gara Drive. If you're going from the police station up O'Gara, they would be on your right-hand side. And some of those, especially the last lot that's there, it's starting to crack, and there's grass and whatnot growing through those areas. So we'll try and patch them up. We'll try and get them maintained and whatnot, but we've got to put them on the radar screen for some resurfacing because, like the front of the high school, like Thornton's Ferry, a few years ago we did Reed's Ferry, the entire circle, the parking lot in Lyons Road. It's really kind of time for those to be looked at and to be put on the CIP for visibility purposes, and perhaps to put them in a warrant article or in the operating budget sometime in the future. Then in 1920, where you go to the paving where Master Cola is and the upper elementary school, there's some drainage we have to do. We kept that separate because we're not quite sure what's underneath the surface of that particular school because there are no plans, and some of the drainage may come as a surprise to us as to where the pipes overlay and where they actually go. So we want to make sure we have enough money in there to correct those issues. We have corrected some of them, and we have found some of them, but I remember doing some exploratory work in front of the triple doors where the Smith gym is, and there was a couple of pipes in there that no one quite really knew where they went to. And I had the people from the MVD come down, people from wastewater treatment, and so there's a lot of work we have to do in that area. So we're keeping that kind of aligned in 1920 with the MES entrance and then the JMU's parking lot. Consolidated SAU, Student Services Building, SAU building, as the superintendent said, we're just kind of keeping that open. There's nothing plotted here. There's some opportunities you have to place it in a spot that you desire to. There's other options that you may have. We just figured we'd leave that one alone for this point in time. Another item we had on the CIP, one that we feel that we kind of need to tackle for 18-19, is the bleachers by the track where the high school is. Those, when you look at them, and I do have a picture of that if you want to pass that down. When you look at those, they have a certain tilt and a skew to them, so they're kind of listing a little bit forward. They're not dangerous or anything like that, but it was mentioned by our insurance carrier that they are New Hampshire Primex, that they're not really, they're definitely not ADA accessible. They're definitely a little bit difficult to maneuver, and they don't exactly match up with the nicer bleachers that we put in. Probably, that was during my time when the bleachers went in, so that was probably a good 15, 16 years ago that the bleachers went in.
So these that you're referring to here are the guest bleachers if you go to a football game, correct?
If that's where you put the guests, and I believe you do, that would be the guest bleachers, okay. Yes. Or they could be the latecomer bleachers, I don't know. But
no, they'd still pack in the other side.
They'd still pack in the other side? Okay, thank you. So those would be the guest bleachers. So it's time to do something with that and at least kind of match the existing set we have. That area, since we did the track and since we did the retaining wall and the railings and everything like that, is really looks terrific, and that's the one little piece. And it's not just an aesthetic; it's kind of a necessity to get those done in the next few years, perhaps next year. We also have another set of bleachers, much like the bleachers we replaced in the high school a few years ago, one by design, one by necessity. We're looking at replacing the bleachers at Master Kohler Upper Elementary School, which would be the Smith Gym. Those are the old wooden form of bleachers that you have. They're rather steep. There's no hand railings on there. And again, it's difficult for people to get up and get down those bleachers without getting a hand from their friends, or they meet new friends on the way down by putting their hands on people's shoulders to get some assistance coming down. So it would be nice, and it would be, those are probably original equipment to that area in the building, I'm sure. And it would be a good thing to look at getting bleachers that have railings, that have areas that would allow them to be ADA accessible. Right now, you don't have any indents in those bleachers where wheelchairs could fit or anything like that. So the old wooden bleachers, they weigh a ton. They are supported by metal bracketry. The metal bracketry is inspected every single year. Any welds that are loose gets taken care of. But in order to update the school and to make it more accessible to to a lot of our community, that would be something that we would look to be doing currently in 1920, the following year. Planning and Building Committee felt very strongly about that, and they moved that up. Next, we have the artificial surface. We're still talking about that. We had it in 22-23. That was placed by the Planning and Building Committee in 2021. It's still something that we're having debates on, whether or not how much is it going to benefit us in the long run, et cetera. So that's an ongoing discussion. Then we had the window replacement for the high school. There's a lot of windows in the high school. They lock via an old tried and true method of placing a stick between the jamb of the window inside and the window itself. We did do a lot of screen replacements over the summertime, just because there was a lot of insects and whatnot coming in because the screens had holes in them. We did do a little bit of upgrade there, but the windows itself, the double panes aren't holding the gas inside, so they're cracked and they're a little bit clouded and whatnot, and the locking mechanisms aren't working properly. Then the last, the last item we have is the technology infrastructure upgrade. Nancy Rose can talk much more eloquently about this than I can, but a lot of it is to replace some of the computers at the middle school, replace some of the lab carts that we have. We're still doing the Wi-Fi saturation throughout the buildings. We tried initially putting wireless devices in hallways and thinking that they could bleed into classrooms, that they would cover classrooms. Naomi's shaking her head, so is Michael. And that affirms what I'm just going to say, that because of the construction of the buildings, the steel bar joists, the cement block, is a little bit more prohibitive. So we're having to go pretty much in every classroom, because even trying to share one between two classrooms, we were just talking to Nancy today about it, that in some areas, if you're in this corner with a device, you won't get a signal at all. So it's really kind of a one-for-one. And with that comes increased wiring. So you have to run wires to get these devices up and running so they can provide Wi-Fi. So we're working on that. We're working on changing cabling in some of the buildings. Some of the buildings are in pretty good shape right now, but there's some old wiring there. We first wired up Reeds and Thorntons back probably around 15 years ago when Cat 5 was all the rage. Not even Cat 5e, it was just Cat 5. And that was state-of-the-art back then. So it's one of these things where it's an ongoing item. Wi-Fi, saturation, the rollover of computers, the library mobile carts, increased storage on our storage area network. A lot of things goes into these items here, and she can give you a better rendition than I can. But in a nutshell, without a big graphic on the screen or anything, that's just for your consideration this evening. And next week I'll take some, I do have some old pictures, but you want to see some new pictures, so I'll give you some new pictures.
We do. Now, we're not here to change or decide on or move forward anything tonight. It's definitely to start the conversation. But if you have any clarifier questions, requests for more information, this is the time. I see Andy, and then I see Michael. And then I see Cinda.
Just really quick, I wanted to offer that I was the liaison in the Planning and Building Committee, so I was part of the conversation last week. They were all about, I think we decided they were a safety theme this time. They actually wanted to move all the bleachers into the first year, and then basically said we'll scan them across 2 years. They were concerned about, really concerned about the bleachers in the Smith Gym. I just want to clarify to those at home, we're talking about, when people hear Massaquoi Upper Elementary School, they immediately think of the all-purpose room, which is where town meetings are, where voting takes place. What we're talking about is the gym, which is actually almost to Massaquoi Elementary, which is in that middle area there, which is taller bleachers, more capacity.
Yes.
So those are the ones, and you talked about original, when they built Smith Gym in I think 73 or 74, when I still went, that was what was there. So they are certainly old school. So there's a lot of concern about that there. They did talk about moving the field upgrade in more, but they also acknowledge that it needs to be part of this whole, how does it fit in the community stuff. So I know we've talked about, it's not just the school district's field, but it's the community's field, and what do we do with fundraising and promotions, and I know that was an action item that we gave to Planning and Building to come up with that. So I think that that's a topic that we'll all have to work pretty closely on in terms of that. So, and in general, they understood what you said about the SAU consolidated building, that there's a lot of balls in the air, so to speak, but they really want to get involved in the discussions as those balls start to sort out, so that'll be key there as well. So that's just some extra color of what happened at the Planning and Building Committee. I did have one question, though, and that's, I believe that the bleachers in the APR at Massaquoi Upper Elementary may even predate me going to the schools there. Is there any issues with those bleachers in that room? Because they get used with events that happen in there, pulled out. I know they're not as tall, but they still are old school, no real paths or things like that.
Well, it's basically the same thing. We go through, we have a crew that comes through, we hire a bleacher company that comes through and looks at all the welds and everything like that. But, you know, those are something you'd want to look forward to replacing also. But because they're not as tall, they don't offer that kind of danger aspect. And if you said they predate you being in that school, or predate you?
Yeah, well, I mean, well, maybe me, I don't know. I started school.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that one.
I started school in that
apologize.
building in 1968.
Yeah.
And the room was there. That was the gym where basketball was played. I think that they were there then. The same
More than
gym,
likely, yes.
bleachers. So
Yeah.
all you have to do is add a few more years, and it does.
2 more years, and
so.
it predates. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
The mascot was a pterodactyl back then, right? Instead.
Move on.
So, I think, who's next? I think it was Michael?
So I know that we're not trying to solve or discuss, but I mean, I think that we've discussed the school's location for quite some time. Do we have a thought of when we're actually going to decide where we're going to put it and what the options are? I mean, is that for us, or is that the Planning Building Committee?
It's us.
Okay, can we put that on the agenda to actually, I think we've narrowed it down quite a bit. Do you think we can actually move forward and actually make a decision?
Please do.
I think we're going to have a non-public session tonight and speak of land, and so I would say off tonight, perhaps a date would be forthcoming.
Okay, and then a follow-up on the turf field possibility is the in the quotes there. I think that it was in the CIP as 1.1 million or 1.2 or something like that previously.
It was 1.5. I think we made the decision to increase it by around
No,
300,000.
I'm actually just trying to make a point, actually, is
Yeah.
that it just keeps on
Cost
increasing.
is going
It's
up,
going
correct.
up. So I know that I have mentioned that I feel that it should be a 50-50 endeavor, 50% taxpayer, 50% funded through other means. I'd like the school board to actually make a decision if that's what we would want to move forward as a recommendation, so that we could actually then start the process of actually communicating that to the community to try and then start the process. And if the school board as a whole decides it's going to be all taxpayer, that's fine, but I would like to see that the school board makes a decision one way or another, so that we can start communicating that, so that if we do decide to fundraise, that it can be a process that can be done, and we might even be able to pull it in sooner. So my two recommendations. Thanks.
Cinda?
Just a quick comment that I'm really happy not to see that the high school cafeteria heat wheel on this. I think it's worthy of a small celebration.
Can I say one thing off of that? One of the most enjoyable things about creating this document was wiping off the year 17-18, because that was so packed with projects that we accomplished, in part due to your support, due to the community support, due to the Planning and Building Committee support, and having this document that we created that we kind of march to and we try and follow. But that was an amazing amount of necessary items that were cleared up in 1 year. So I just want to thank you guys.
So is there anything else? I would have to say that this is quite a bit. I just want to make sure I have one clarifier, because I know that 23-24 you mentioned 361,665 in roofing is appropriate based on the grid that you provide. That's not on the CIP. Okay, and what do we know what building that is?
No, I just, this is one of these things where I was talking to Tom right before we were going to do this, so I've got to find out what area that is.
I did.
But I'd like
I
to
did ask
slide
for the
that in.
file at 5:30, so therefore.
Yeah.
So that's perfect. So thank you. I think what's important to understand, and I'm just going to put it out there, is that community feedback is important to us. You know, we're definitely open to hearing what what is of great value, interest, and importance to you. I know when it comes to the way we did our budget last year, we had a great opportunity to take those that are not what you would call urgent to the point of disrupting the educational process and putting it out to the voters, things like the paving, things like the asbestos abatement. So I think we will definitely be talking as time goes on how we can possibly, identify and add to our notes those projects that we feel can be done that way. And then there are those that, because it is going to be disruptive to the educational process, if buses can't get into an area because the pavement is just too weak for it to support, then we're going to have problems getting the kids on and off the bus safely. So but as we did it last year, we put some warrant articles up, gave the voters the last word on these things. I think that's something that we're going to want to discuss as we prepare our budgets, as we prepare our warrants, as we move this CIP forward. Knowing what our thoughts are as we do move it forward is going to be very valuable for us to have kind of that conversation around it. So, as the initial, I think that there's never work not to be done. I think that we always have to keep an eye on the big picture, that by maintaining our facilities, we're asking for less of the taxpayer than letting our facilities not get maintained and needing to instead of repair, rebuild. So we've been very good about that as a district, and I definitely want to make sure as we look at these projects that we look at how our decisions will impact future boards. So I think that we're definitely looking at a very big year and lots to do. And Marge, did you have some?
When you finish.
Oh, sure, I'm good.
Okay. I just want you to know that after we met with the Planning and Building Committee, Matt and I came back to central office and kind of processed what had happened. And one of the things that we really would like you to consider, because you really are the final word when it comes to what are we going to go forward with, is to take a look at the bleachers earmarked for the Smith Gym and at J. Muse, and take a look at bringing that over to 2018-19. So there would be 2 bleacher replacements that we would be into. And I say that because I think after we listen to the testimony of a member of the Planning and Building Committee who goes to events there, who goes to basketball games there, and she talked about the patrons that go there and how concerned she has been about their going up and down, or not going up and down, all trying to vie for the bottom bench because they're just too afraid to go up. It kind of was impactful once we got away from the meeting to process, to say that when you hear those kinds of things, I think it means now is the time, perhaps. So I would ask for your consideration.
Michael?
Based off of that, can we look at all the bleachers and just do an inventory and try to possibly look at the cost of replacing the bleachers that Andy sat on as a kid?
I sat on them 2 weeks ago.
I know, I'm just joking. But I'm just saying that if your thought process is maybe it'd be good to actually take a full inventory of all the bleachers and make it a full safety audit of the bleachers and a proposal to the community of upgrading them all if they're needed.
Yeah, we could do that, yeah.
Well, you would have reports as well that you can share with us on the inspections that are done every year too, correct?
Excuse me, I'm sorry?
The inspections that are done every year on the bleachers, you have reports on those?
I'd have to check with Tom if there's
Okay.
official reports, but I know there's, paperwork going back and forth and recommendations, and they go ahead and they take care of the work, but.
Okay, so we can look at what's
It's-
been done.
it's-
to keep
It's
it
not
going,
like I
too.
can give you a report like, when they test the elevators and they test the fire extinguishers and they test the fire alarms. I know there is a company that goes through, so I'll see what
Oh,
he has.
fair enough, but we have probably some, at least initial information right now, so.
And it, just for clarification,
Yeah.
I'm not thinking just on the safety and how well they're constructed. What I'm thinking is just access, if we're going to do it,
Mhm.
might be better, so thanks.
So ADA compliance as well. Sounds like a plan. Excellent. Are there any other questions on the CIP? Excellent. And I will just give one last word on this, and that is with the bonded debt report, which is so ideal for us. The bonded debt is scheduled to expire in 23-24 as it stands today. So we are we're working on it. So and doing a great job. So actually, I'm going to correct that. It is the last year, actually. No, it is 23-24. Whoops. My straight edge moved. So we're good. Okay. So we will also bring this up at next meeting and go into more of a workshop mode. And if we need more time, we can absolutely spend one more meeting on that as well and still be in good shape. So we will go on to item number 8, which is the new school board policy, second review of the health, education, and exemption from instruction policy with Marge.
Thank you. So what I'd like to tell you is that this particular policy is a work in progress, and the reason I say that is because it was given over to the leadership team last week at our first meeting on the 13th, and they will come back this week with their comments, especially the administrators at the upper elementary school, the middle school, and the high school, for which this policy is really pertinent because it's grades 6 through 12. But what I want you to know is that after a policy comes before you and you make comment, I always go back to the comments that were rendered by particular board members and then try and address what your concerns were. So some of them will be addressed tonight and some of them will probably be pushed off until the next meeting. So right in the beginning, Board Member Thompson talked in terms of the fourth paragraph right under the main header, which was really talking about how parents won't be notified and legal guardians about this particular policy. You might remember that it talked initially about email, other written materials, social media, and the website or phone call. And so based on what was said by Board Member Thompson, I went back and took out social media and took out other written material and literally highlighted letter and website because I believe those were the two kinds of communication that you would want to be offered, especially because it's very often that health teacher or a principal might compose a letter for a parent, and then the website is where it will ultimately be posted for persons. So that was highlighted. Under the opt-out procedure and form, I literally went back to the law and read the law as it was formulated and rewrote the entire section, because you will see what now comes forward is that parents, guardians, number one, look at what is being offered up in health and sex education, and if there is anything, any material that's objectionable to them, they can say that they don't want their son or daughter to participate in it. So the real important phrase there is objectionable material. And so that should be the overriding reason. The second paragraph talks in terms of those parents or guardians or students who are emancipated, that is 18 years of age, can also say that they don't want to participate in a particular unit of health or sex education for religious reasons or objections. So that's really the number two piece. So it definitely separates that out. And then in the third paragraph, it really talks in terms of what is it that parents need to do, or legal guardians, and that is they need to confer ultimately with a principal or health teacher and fill out an opt-out form. And on that opt-out form, they will state the reasons why they want to opt out. And the principal will talk with the parent about what might be done in lieu of the material presented. And in the law, it specifically says that if something else is to be put in its place, that it is at the parent's expense for whatever might be offered up, because the student has to meet the state requirements for health education. And then notice the law also states that if someone starts asking for the name of the parents or guardians and what it is that they have objection to, that is not any material that can be given over to anyone under RSA 91A, which had completely been absent from the original policy I presented, and I think that's terribly important. So if we ever got asked about it, we could talk about the number of parents that came forward, but we wouldn't get into any specificity. So you can see just by your query, this has been, I think, tightened up quite a bit from how it was presented to you initially. So it was Vice Chair Schneider that asked if the only opt-out reason was religious. That's been addressed. And also it was School Board Member Schoenfeld that asked to have a phrase flipped, which has happened. And the only thing that I really didn't get into yet is about how parents are going to be notified every year, and just how principals think they really want to go about it. What will be the preferred means of communication? All of that will be addressed this Wednesday, so I'll have more knowledge when I come back to you. But I decided to go as far as I felt I could go, just to show you from one session to the next that some modification had been done.
Other questions? I guess there are. Let's take notes. Sorry, guys. So who's up first? We'll take Cinda.
My question is regarding the opt-out procedure and form. There's the 3 different sections.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering why in the second section it's students over 18 years of age or parents, guardians. I was wondering why the first and the third paragraphs or points don't also include students over 18 years of age or.
And that I followed the law. So I just did the paragraph that was specific to the religious exemption. So if I were to query that, I would go back to an attorney like Bear Christina or whatever to ask that question.
Yeah, that's the only thing that really stood out for
Okay.
me is why
Mhm.
there was that distinction
Yep.
between.
I'm happy to ask.
All right, thank you.
Mike?
I was going to ask the similar question, but I also thought that if we actually put student over 18 years of age or parents guardian on paragraph 1, would we need paragraph 2? I mean, do we actually have to call out religious objections if they just...
We do.
It's an objection? Okay. I'm just... If objection is an objection, so... Okay.
we need to specify it because that's in the law. So I just think if it's in the law, it just needs to be said.
Okay. Thank you very much for clarification.
Naomi?
I think this has come along very, very nicely. Thank you. I think that there is still a little ambiguity in the first two paragraphs under opt-out procedure and form, and I think we're all kind of honing in on that piece. I understand your reading of it. When I simply skim it myself, the first piece seems almost introductory. It says parents or guardians may want to have their child opt out, and then seems to clarify that those who are allowed are those with religious reasons. I'm not sure. There are any number of ways that might be addressed, but I think that might be an ambiguity.
Okay. So on that note, we'll have something to discuss about this policy at our next meeting versus consent, because there's, so, and with that, at our next meeting, when we will actually deliberate on this policy, we can take one of two options. If we feel it's ready, we have the option, I believe, to vote that night, or we can put it on consent for the next meeting. So based on how things go, we'll keep an open mind, but I think we are pushing it forward in the right direction. In March, you have everything you need from us?
Thank you.
Great. Okay. So we're on to the housekeeping part of the evening, which is item number 9, the approval of the September 5th, 2017 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve? Made by Andy, seconded by Naomi. Are there any edits? Cinda?
I'll be abstaining from the final vote on this, but
Okay.
I did want to suggest putting the piece where I asked a question about parking on page 2, line 74. I would put that above line 70 before you called a recess.
Right. Details. Yeah, you didn't. She did not text back in. Were there any other edits? Seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Abstain. The motion carries 3-1-0 with Board Member Thompson excused for a moment. 301. Sorry, did I say 310? Okay, 301. Sorry, guys. We are on to item number 10, which is the consent agenda with Mark.
On consent tonight, we have the following teacher nomination. Michael Shaughnessy, technology education teacher at Merrimack High School.
Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Made by Andy. Go ahead.
I move we approve the consent agenda as read.
Is there a second? Seconded by Cinda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. On to other, which is item number 11. First, is there any correspondence to come before the board? Andy.
I've heard separately from constituents on the homework policy, there was a question about future PFOA testing in the schools, which I passed that query on to the assistant superintendent for business.
Excellent. Mike.
I had one person reach out in regards to possible sale of technology within the school, which I'm not sure how much I can get in detail, but was actually addressed and was not correct when they reached out. I had another person reach out regarding the water testing also, had several regarding the homework, and then had one reach out in regards to questioning of extra credit and how it was given to students. So.
Okay. Naomi.
Yes, it's a first for me. I had several people reach out to me regarding the homework situation, and one regarding summer homework for AP classes at the high school.
Oh.
More complicated than that, but yeah.
Okay. Layers of the onion. So something that we've been doing for a long time is we've been talking at correspondence about what we got. But I think just as Andy did, and I've been trying to do as well, is to talk about when we get those, my concern is when we get those communications that they sit with us and we have a general idea that what someone was asking about, but not what we've done to get that someone the supports that they need. So where Andy said he got someone in touch with Matt. That's important, because I don't want it just that they're reaching out to us on these topics. It's that reaching out to us on these topics and what have we done to be able to get them resources as appropriate. Mike?
I'll follow up on 2 items that I had then.
Okay.
One, I did request the individual to reach back out to the teacher just for clarification on the matter, and that's regarding the extra credit. In regards to the technology, I reached out to Nancy Rose, got confirmation, and provided that back to the individual.
Excellent. So it's important for them to know, when we are so often just conduits for advocacy for our constituents, when did you reach out to us, how we can help them. So I think that's important. So thank you, guys. And Marge.
Yes, I want to ask a clarification because 2 of you brought up PFOA water testing. And what I'd like to know is, do you want us to go further with that and actually do the testing? One of the things that the 3 of us are adverse to doing is just moving forward on something out like that without you saying, we would like you to go forward and do it. I think that's just an important thing rather than us just going off and doing whatever. I think it needs to be formally stated. So would you like that done?
Michael, and I think Andy has hand up as well.
The communications that have been coming recently have been to ask for the school to make sure that there's filtration, at least at Bubbler, or full filtration for the school in general, not just on testing. And I don't think that we could discuss that further, but based off of the communications at this point that have been with the school board, I really don't know where the school board stands in regards to where our concerns are. So since we haven't addressed that, I'm not sure if you could go further from there.
Andy?
So my request is different. Mine was strictly just asking the next time we were going to test. And I believe that at our meeting, when you went through the results, we mentioned that we were going to test again in the fall. I think there was a statement that said that. So I guess the question, in my mind, I thought it was going to happen, right? So just as a matter of course.
So I would just say as a clarifier, then I think given the fact that we're halted at the moment, but hear what you're saying, I believe the first day of autumn is this Friday, so perhaps we can just go forward and have it for you in October. That's fall, right? Yes?
Yeah. The leaves are changing today.
There you go.
So I mean,
Thank heavens for the calendar.
Today.
Michael?
Point of order, can I make a motion?
I don't see why not. I don't think there's a problem with that.
Just regards this water, so I would like to see a motion that we ask for the administration to do testing every 3 months moving forward until addressed in other means.
Do we have a second? I'll second for the point of discussion at least. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing issue for the community that the community wants us to make sure that we're aware of. I think it's a simple thing that we can continue to monitor the water that's coming into the school district and be able to very easily address the issue if it becomes a higher concern. And until I think that it changes within the community, that the concern goes away, then it should be an ongoing process for the school district.
Cinda?
I know for me, I think what I would like to see is the next test results, and then at that point discuss what our next steps would be. I think that having that extra data point, there's no harm, no foul in saying, do we want to now do this 3 months later, or do we want to wait 6 months later? So I don't know that that I would support making the test protocol every 3 months at this point in time, but I definitely agree it needs to be tested.
I would have to say to that point that we had the kids are back in school. There's more usage of the water this time of year. So if that impacts things, I think it's definitely something to consider. I think I'll be bringing up something a little later in the meeting that might, change our perspective. And Michael, just a point of clarification. You don't know where this board stands. There's a motion, a second, and a vote that requires a position. That never happened, but there was always the opportunity for a motion, a second, and a vote. So we've talked about water on a number of occasions, and that is always, whether whether it's win, lose, or draw, we always have the option to set up a position with a motion, second, and vote. So, which is what we're doing now. So with that, I think we always have the opportunity to bring it up, agenda item, and everything else. So on that note, I think there's more to come. I'm going to just kind of preface it by saying that water is something that we're always going to be keeping an eye on, but we're not the only ones. Our town council does as well. And I'm going to be under new business talking about a joint meeting with the town council. I think when we talk about filtering our buildings, it's going to be much more, it's going to be cost ineffective when you consider that it's going to be a measurable fraction of a number as opposed to the whole town doing it from a central point. So it's something that I think the town council and us both want to talk about in a joint body. Michael?
Since you're talking about filtration, I understand the point of the cost. And as I had mentioned when this first came up, I think that it's beneficial to actually understand that cost and to understand what our options are as an individual consumer of water, not as a just within the town, and obviously working with the town would be good. But I think, as I had mentioned before, when everybody's worried that we don't have the money, which at the time I was not asking to spend any money, I was simply asking to address the matter and find out how much the total cost would be so that we can move forward and figure out what option A, B, and C is, where it seemed that the board was not in favor of that. Either A, I did not do a good job of communicating it, or B, I did not have the understanding of the board to move forward. So I understand where you want to go with the town, but I think at some point the school district has to make a stand by itself as a ratepayer to the MVD and not necessarily as a town as a whole.
And I would agree with that, but I would also say that we never had a vote, so we never had a position or not a position. So
fine, I'll make a motion after this.
Okay. So are there any other, actually we still have this motion, so Naomi and then Andy.
I think it's a little bit premature, and I agree with Cinda that I would want to see this next results and then chart a course through. But the idea is one I'd like to see revisited and soon, and that is
Absolutely.
of setting a schedule moving forward rather than having to bring it up every single time again. Yeah.
Andy?
I think that we need to take a step back a little bit because we've heard that they're going to do another test. That was our ask the last time. Michael's right that we didn't really take a position, or I mean, we didn't ask formally to how often we're going to test. We didn't ask about filtration or anything like that. But I think that there are a lot of options on the table depending on how we want to pursue this, including one of the constituents that reached out to me from the previous meeting talked about other vehicles for this district to use, the school district to use to obtain funding for filtration, what other districts and other states have done. There's a lot of things and discussions that I've heard that are all over the map. I think that if we're truly going to sit and talk about PFOAs, we need to put them all on the table. When we talk about filtration, we talk about options for funding. It's all going to be part of the holistic discussion. So a motion being made now for something like a direct test every 3 months or something like that, I think I would want us to step back and look a little more holistically and decide as a board a general approach rather than a testing pattern, at least right now.
Okay. So are there any other comments on the motion? We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The motion fails 1-4-0. So we are going to do this test. I think, when we get further into the agenda, which isn't too much left, we can absolutely plan long term. So I think we're still in a good place. Are there any other correspondence from the board? Comments? Cinda?
We wanted to just go back and discuss briefly the canine situation and how we move forward for this year. I would either like to make a motion right now authorizing an email about this year's protocol to the parents, or at least put it on the agenda for our next meeting so that we get that communication out to students and parents and staff.
So is that a motion?
Sure, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize administration to send out a similar correspondence like we did last year regarding the use of the canine at the high school.
Okay. And I'll second for discussion. Are there any comments to the motion? Michael starts and then Andy.
Thank you, Cinda, for that. I would like the communication to be very general, just saying that it would be in the future, kind of similar to, I think, what last year was, obviously. However, the time frame was kind of guided based off of the time in school year. So, thanks.
Andy?
So I'm willing to support this motion, but never again, because I think that we as a board need to encourage our administration to put this as either a policy, maybe the policy is not the right word, or a note in student guides that this is what will happen. That we, the district, have retain the right, or our policy or our procedure is that we have the ability to do this. I was hoping we'd never have to say it again, and that would be inherent in terms of our flow. I understand the point that we want to maybe do at the beginning of this year, but this has got to be the norm going forward, and we've got to do it in such a way that we don't have to make a motion and say we got to do a memo explaining the process again. We were so careful the first time to do this. I don't want us to have to do this regularly, because it gets us into this thing where, well, you sort of let the cat out of the bag. You're going to do it. You didn't say when, but you sort of let it out. So now kids are going to be cautious. I'd just like to be. I'd like it to be part of our normal flow. That's all.
Okay. Naomi and then Cinda.
I think that announcing it for this year is an excellent idea, and I would support that. As far as whether we should do it moving forward or not, I'd like more information on best practice. Do districts, if there's information on whether, which one gives better results, informing or not informing, because we're not trying to just catch people out. We're trying to create a culture where the items are not in our schools, and which one creates that. But that's a conversation for further down the line. I think starting it now is not a bad idea.
Cinda?
Yeah, I think just getting that policy out there is a good idea for this year, and then we have time to figure out how we want to move forward in the upcoming years. Whether we want the formal, policy where we go through the first reading, second reading, the use of the K-9 in our schools, so on and so forth. But for right now, we could get that word out sooner versus later. Very similar to last year. The only thing I would like to do is make sure that we don't limit it to the school structure itself. I don't remember how it was worded last year. That it's open, should we agree in the searches, or one of the searches or more, that we may want to go on school property or the parking lot.
So use the word campus, and that way buildings and grounds are kind of inferred?
Yeah.
Michael?
First, sorry about that, Andy. I think my inside voice kind of got out for me. But just to comment, I actually do think it's good to put it out there, because it is another level of warning to the children or to the students, and giving them that kind of just another means to kind of get them to not bring the drugs into school if they are, just a little bit more hesitation. So.
Well, I think we want to play off of what Ken said tonight a little bit too, and that is it was not part of the structure of the 8th grade transition program, which includes students coming to the high school at the end of the school year, and it's also, and the 3 of us were at the 8th grade parent night for incoming freshmen, which was very well attended, that we make sure that we have a very well-structured message that Ken can deliver to parents at that event as well. So I think if we have those kind of communications that are direct to those who hadn't experienced it before, being our incoming 8th graders to 9th, then I think we have, a long-term strategy in place. So I'm totally good with it, especially specifically for this year because of that. They didn't have it. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 1. The motion carries 410. So are there any other comments? Which got a lot of business done, actually. Seeing none, we will go on to new business. And I kind of let, again, the cat out of the bag. But as I had mentioned, I reached out to Chair Harrington based on our plan to have a joint meeting with the town council. And she and I actually ran into each other, so it facilitated. So in lieu of a return phone call, we ran into each other. So based on her agenda, we're looking for dates in November that may work for all of you. If you can get those to me in an email, I'll try to find the ones that match and get them over to the town council, and after we vet them through administration to make sure they're available, and try to find a time to get together with the town council. And the second thing is making sure that as we do that, if you can provide items for discussion that you want considered for the agenda. Andy?
So you want us to send you for the month of November every evening that's open, regardless of the day of the week? Is that your ask?
If you have it, that's fine. If I can match
just
it up.
curious
I just know a lot of you travel for work, so.
Well, I was just curious if you had a focus on a particular night of the week or that you want us to look for.
Well, we know the first and third Monday are out. We know that the town council meetings, which are Thursdays, are usually out. We also know Veterans Day's out. And we know Thanksgiving is out. So I think when you narrow all that down, we're going to have fewer days than we expected. So I'm willing to match up what we have. So if you can email those to me and any topics for consideration with the joint meeting, that would be great. And the second item of new business that I had is at our next board meeting, I'd like to be able to present all of our budget messages. So every year we go through, and based on our expectations of what administration will present, we definitely want them to know what we're thinking with our budget this year. So on that note, if we can have budget messages prepared, I will then at our next meeting take your budget messages away, compile them, and give the superintendent at our second meeting in October the compiled unified board budget message. Andy.
So I don't know if this is a new business or comment, but it just struck me sitting here. So earlier in the meeting, Mike mentioned that he wanted us to have a topic where we talk about the SAU SPED building, the joint building. I'd like to ask that we have that, but that we wait until we see the full budget presentation so we know everything that's in flight this year. Because I want to make sure that we understand everything that's going to be happening from a budget perspective, results of our non-public that's coming and other stuff. Because I think that with all the different changes, I'd like us to have the budget in front of us so we know everything that's going on. So that's a comment.
Michael.
Just for clarification, I'm just looking to try to pinpoint a spot that we want to put the school, not so much, I mean, the SEU SPED building. It's not that we're going to spend it, so kind of just moving the process forward. So I'm not sure if budget is needed for that.
Well, the reason I said it is because a spot might not be the only consideration.
Okay.
I mean, if we decide to say, where do we want to put it, that assumes that the option on the table is to build it.
I disagree, but okay.
Is there any other new business to come before the board? I'm looking. Okay, I think we're good. Oh, but wait, there's more. Marge.
The only other thing I want to offer up, and I believe you've asked me to share, what will be on the next agenda, and I can think you see some of those items that are rolling from tonight over to the next meeting, which is October 2nd. I want you to know that Matt and I spent time with Jim Lucy, who you know is our Honeywell representative, who was here at the last meeting because it was Honeywell that sponsored two of our educators at the Space Academy. And when he sat with us, he was talking to us because we have been engaged in several Honeywell projects over time, and he wanted to talk to us about some energy efficiencies and some of the items in our district that really need to be looked at. So we talked about lighting and improving lighting. We were really looking at our learners and what they would need, and so talking about getting into LED lights as compared to the fluorescent, and looking at air circulation, which has been something the board has talked about over time, and thinking in terms of some of our boilers, which are really old. And so you might remember back when we did the energy conversion, we had also a gentleman from Honeywell by the name of Wally Howe, which who was just a wonderful person to go through and look at where we stood, almost like from an energy audit point of view. And so Wally is now retired, but he cares about Merrimack because he's done some work here. So what we talked about is just doing an audit of the district by having Wally walk back through it and looking at the 6 buildings, and then having Jim and he come forward, and that could be done as early as October 2nd or October 16th to talk about where we stand. Now you'll notice that none of these items are in our capital improvement plan because that's not where we were. We moved forward with the items that we had already talked about in the past. But what Jim was about is not only talking about the particular items that need to be looked at because of the age of some of these things and better learning environments for our students, but also to talk in terms of refinancing. So he understands that there are lots of things that you as a board want to do, and through some refinancing, you might be able to do it quicker. So all I'm saying is he and Wally are prepared to come before you, hopefully in October, and off of that, we'll figure out what might be a next step. But it just seemed to be a good thing to take a look at for our future, one way or the other.
Sounds good. And Wally is a definite, as long as I've been in the Merrimack district, I think Wally has been working with Honeywell, and those are facilities better than, almost as well as we do. So almost as well as Tom Tussaud. So great for him to come out of retirement specifically for us. So we're on to item number 13, committee reports. Andy, we know you have one.
2.
There you go.
And they both happened one right after the other. It was great. So on September 11th, the superintendent and I attended the CERES Board of Directors meeting. The news of note there is that, well, 2 pieces. One, that the building in Bedford, Commerce Drive, the building is going to be closed at the end of this month, so that the CERES will no longer own. They will be renting space back for a period of time to stay there, but they will be and they're going to stay in the building essentially till the end of the year, and they'll run the catering business through the end of the year to fulfill any obligations that they currently have. And then starting on January 1st, a little before from a legal or from a rent standpoint, but they're going to be moving to another building on South River Road. I believe it's closer to the 101 interchange. So CERES will be out of that building on Commerce Drive over the coming quarter, essentially. And the other thing is that they are looking at sort of a charter of the way that they want to be able to exist moving forward. So they're looking at different sort of guiding principles and things like that to continue. So CERES looking at their life after the catering business, after the building is gone. So that's the conversation that's going on with CERES at this point. The other is the meeting after that was planning building, which I talked about earlier. They had full quorum. Well, not full. They had quorum. They had most members there. A lot of discussion about all the different topics we discussed. But I think they were, I think the real takeaway is that when we talk about any movement of these, the special ed or the special student services and the SAU members, they want to be involved, but they also want us to sort of take the lead and help orchestrate the marketing and the proposals and things like that. Because the last time they came up with a proposal and tried to market it, and we sort of didn't really take a lead to push it as strongly. And I think that's one of the learnings that they keep reminding us of, is that it needs to be us driving with them supporting whatever the decision is. So that was the takeaway from the planning building.
And I would just add to Andy, another thing that was very pleasing to me was that the committee as a whole is very willing to meet with the planning board together to hear the architect make the presentation of the 3 options. So it will be the first time in my history that our elected planning and building committee and the planning board for the town will come together around a particular topic of concern. That, to me, is very important.
Michael?
I had the professional development committee meeting last week, and they went over the My Learning Plan and some of the benefits of the My Learning Plan and the new features and capabilities within it, which was very interesting. And that was the only meeting I had.
Excellent. And seeing no others, we will close committee reports. We're on to item number 14, public comments on agenda items. I'm seeing no takers. We'll move on to 15, which is the manifest. We'll take a moment to sign that. And then I will entertain a motion to go into non-public session per RSA 91-A:3, Section 2, subsection D. Do I have a motion made by Michael, seconded by Andy? Naomi, how do you vote?
In favor?
Michael?
In favor?
Cinda?
In favor.
Andy?
Yo.
And I also vote in favor. Well, that's old school for you, isn't it? Thank you and good night.